everybody. I'd like to call to order the budget workshop meeting today on the 22nd. And, okay, we're official. Could everybody rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance?
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
So in accordance with the agenda that we have this evening, I will open with a couple comments, and then Brian Freeman will take over for the presentation.
We actually have something else to do before that.
Bid acceptance.
Bid acceptance.
Okay. We have an order of business, the bid acceptance. Did you want to mention anything about that? Okay.
So last Thursday, we opened up bids for the first phase of our 2016 capital project. So what we opened up bids for was our elementary bathrooms, the boiler systems at the elementary, the pegboard, the ceiling replacement, the playgrounds, and the air conditioning at Clem North, Plank North, and State Road, as well as DeWitt. So that's what this first phase. Second phase will be the library at Thomas and the Spry Cafetorium. So we opened up the first bid, and unfortunately, the bids were high. Much higher than we expected, about 5 to 7% higher than what we projected. So we had an itemized list of what was the most important to us to get done. And unfortunately, so the pegboard is going to be put on hold for right now so we can get some of the higher priority items done with this project. So what I've presented for you guys is our general contractor, our plumbing, our mechanical, and our electrical. But then we also have a site work bid, and I wanted to spend a couple seconds discussing that because I'm asking you to reject that bid. We had hoped to have several site contractors for the playgrounds that would come and be able to do it cheaper than state contract. Because normally when we do playgrounds with PTSA, we buy everything off a state contract, and then usually we'll have either our group or the state contract people install it. So we were hopeful that with a project of this size and the amount of work to be done, that we would get some aggressive bids that would actually be cheaper than the state contract pricing. Unfortunately, that did not happen. And the pricing is actually more expensive than state contract. So what we're going to do is then reject the one bid that you see in your packet from Titan for site work and go and get the work done off a state contract. So that's just one point of clarification I wanted to make for the board.
How much of a difference is that?
About $70,000.
Okay.
And our workforce doesn't have the time to do it?
For 7 playgrounds, that would tie up our entire ground staff for the entire summer. It's not so much that we couldn't do it, because I never want to say that. You know, we'd give it a valiant effort. It's what we would not be able to accomplish if we took
The
this
other
on
areas
ourselves.
that need to be done?
Yes.
Like the pegboard, maybe?
So because there's 2 phases, that second phase, we know there's some things here at Spry that are going to be more costly than what we originally thought. So we want to protect that budget. And so once the bids go out for the second phase, hopefully they're better than where we are. We think we, unfortunately, and some of the other districts around us that opened up bids in the last 2 weeks, the media frenzy around tariffs, we were impacted by that. Nothing's happened, but the perception became reality, and we saw contractors raise their prices because of the unknown and what might have happened. So I think that cost us in the fall when we're projected to get approval, hopefully things will settle down by then.
And do we need to vote on these?
Yes.
And do we need to vote separately on the site contract?
No, you could just all the 2 on 2.
Okay.
So there's acceptance
So-
and rejection in it.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So we need a motion to reject the first bid and accept the second?
No, you're just going to accept the recommendation by Brian?
Correct.
By Brian.
Okay.
Okay.
So we need a motion to accept Brian's recommendation
So move.
by
Second?
Jan, second by Mike. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. So tonight, we will learn more about instructional areas, including curriculum and special ed, athletics, library, co-curricular areas, and pupil services, the areas that impact our students the most. Specifically, we'll hear strategies around special ed that align with our goals, keeping student achievement at the forefront in an operationally effective way. We'll also hear some ideas around security, safety, and mental health that are certainly foremost in everyone's minds. We've heard from our students and continue to hear concerns of citizens throughout the country about how important the issue of school safety is for us to address. We'll also receive an update about foundation aid, as there are different numbers being proposed by the governor, the state senate, and the assembly. And so far, they are all in our favor, but we'll see where they land. So with that, I'll hand it over to you to
Thank you.
continue.
Good evening. So this will be workshop number 2 with a focus on our instructional areas. On our agenda for this evening, here's the areas we're going to look at. And I've added, due to the Assembly and the Senate passing their one-house budgets, I thought it would be important to go over some of the salient points that we're seeing from both those budgets that could have an impact on us. Because this is the last time we'll be together for a couple weeks, and the state budget is due the 1st, so we won't be together again for another couple weeks, so a lot could be happening. So I just wanted to kind of get some of those thoughts and ideas that are bouncing around Albany out there. Okay, hopefully maybe next Thursday we'll hear something, or next Friday, but more likely it'll probably be the following week. With the Easter break scheduled in there when the state finally does adopt their budget. So we'll have updates as we go through. So first, I just want to go through the comparisons between the Senate and the Assembly budgets. Foundation aid, most important topic. Remember, Governor was about $330 million that he had set in his budget for an increase, which for us was about $414,000. Assembly is going to a $1.2 billion increase with a 4-year phase-in of the foundation aid formula. And the Senate is almost double at $717 million increase, so double of what the governor has proposed. So both numbers are north of where we are, so that's good news. And just as history has always played out, it always seems like somewhere in between the Assembly and Senate is where we land on a compromise. So $7.2 million is our foundation amount owed if the formula is allowed to run. I wanted to remind everyone of that number because the Assembly has a 4-year phase-in of that amount. Okay. Expense-based aid cap. Governor proposed a 2% cap, which we talked about in January. Update on that. The Assembly and Senate have rejected that. Which is good news, because that cap is actually a reduction for us. School safety, Assembly hasn't had a specific proposal. The governor's proposal was in January, before the recent events in Florida. The Senate has roughly a dozen different proposals. So there's a multitude of proposals that run from grant-based initiatives to capital project items. So we'll see how that, keep an eye on, wait and see what's included. Aid forgiveness, that's for building aid issues. We don't really have these issues, but it comes down to clerical mistakes that districts make that get their final cost reports, get their contracts in past an aid date. So this would give aid forgiveness for districts in that scenario. Also important to us is the stop arm cameras. The Assembly has not changed the governor's proposal, but the Senate has put language in that requires these to be reimbursable. So as we bought them for buses on the stop, as they go out on the stop arms, and I talked about this in budget advisory, it's just about a year ago. The most sensitive part of the school bus is the stop arm camera, as we were picking up about 20 of those throughout the district that had blown off during the windstorm. So we have to work through what exactly is going to be the procedure around this with the upkeep, the year-to-year expenses. Is there going to be continuous funding behind that? So we'd like to see that. Summer special education we talked about. The Assembly and Senate are rejecting the governor's proposal. Remember, that was dropping the aid ratio from 80% down to be more in line with our excess cost ratio, which would amount to probably be about a 75% reduction in aid for summer school special education. No student goes hungry. What are we doing there that'll impact education? Assembly allows for communication to go home with the student to the parent, so you could stick a note in a backpack or remind the kid that they have a balance. The Senate is a little bit more robust, allowing debt collectors to reclaim unpaid charges. You know, that's very popular in large urban districts, county districts throughout the nation that use debt collectors to chase these fees down. And also some building aid for the breakfast after the bell alterations. So if you needed to change the design of certain areas, you could get some building aid to do that. So we'll wait and see what's included and comes down the pipe there. Some other things, the Division of Human Rights, allowing that state government arm, the governor proposed to allow them to investigate student challenges or claims. Right now, they investigate employee matters, but this would extend that to students. Senate rejects, Assembly accepts the governor's proposal. For us, I think that would be a significant administrative challenge and task if now students were filing complaints and we had to allocate our resources to go and defend, fight, and follow through with the information gathering that they do. STAR program, governor was going to cap at 0. Senate and Assembly are both in agreement, rejecting the proposal and keeping the 2% cap. Minority and women-owned businesses. Assembly modifies the plan to allow for it to be phased over 3 years. Senate rejects. This, for instance, capital projects would be significantly impacted because what do you do in the situation if you get 6 bids and only one is a minority and women-owned business, but it's also the most expensive? Do you have to take it? Can you reject it because it's the most expensive, but go to the other business? We have to wait and see what the exact wording of this, but we have the sense that it will impact our costs. If people know the amount of vendors we could use gets smaller, the price generally tends to go up on those things. And then CTE, our Career Technical Education, EMCC program with Monroe One. There's a cap on the salaries right now that we can get aid on for those teachers that are part of that program. It's $30,000. Senate will raise that to 35. The Assembly raises that over the next several years to 52. So it would drive significantly more aid back to the districts that participate in those programs.
I find it
Good.
interesting that they're increasing aid for the CTE, but they refuse to increase the DS's salaries at all. Just
There's
side comment.
yeah, counter proposals for that one as well.
Yeah.
I don't think the Senate has taken that one up. The Assembly has. So
DS salaries?
for DS salaries,
Oh, they are working on it.
yeah.
That's amazing. Is there anything we can do to push it along?
Yeah, but the DSs are not too enthusiastic, thinking that they don't think it's going to go through.
Well, I know, but is there
Yeah.
something we could do
Yeah.
to help it along?
Contact Senator Helming.
Yeah.
Do you know Dan is doing 2 jobs for 1 salary?
I know.
Yeah, I didn't include that here because it's
Yeah,
a unique
yeah,
BOCES
yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I wanted things
But it would affect, in
Cherry
the long run, our...
that are affecting Webster.
Yeah.
So. Okay, any questions on what's going on there? Because that's a lot that's going to be coming at us once the budget gets finalized. So I wanted to give everybody those topics that I'll be updating you on.
Yeah.
So you think you'll be like within 2 weeks of when we need our final budget, that we'll
I'm
get?
I'm hopeful. They've been on time. So I'm hopeful we'll hear news soon after Easter.
Okay.
Okay, so what does our state aid look like? No, we went over the governor's proposal back in January, but we needed a little bit more time to look at what that actually meant for us, especially around the expense-based aids, our high-cost private, BOCES, and transportation. That's why I have them highlighted for you of what the numbers are really going to be and what I'm proposing for our budget. You see foundation aid is what it is. The high cost, what we budgeted in 17-18, is the first column, governor's proposal is the second column, and then what I anticipating our aid will be in those expense base in the third column. So a little bit more than what the governor's proposed, because remember, I'm using up-to-date data on our student counts and projecting our expenditures. So I think we're actually going to get more than the governor said in that area. Private excess cost, I'm expecting more than what we got in 17-18, but a little less than what the governor has stated we will get. BOCES, governor is saying we're a little over 5, but I think we're going to stay relatively flat due to some changes with our WADA and some of the formulas. Building aid staying the same. And transportation, looking at where our expenditure is going to be, it will be more than last year that we budgeted for, but not nearly the amount that the governor proposed we were going to be. Remember, he's using August submittals when it's pretty much a budget number and not an actual expenditure number. So all in all, I'm projecting over 17-18 when it comes to state aid, $679,166 more in state aid than last year, with foundation aid being the coin toss of seeing what we're going to get, just taking the governor's number for right now. Okay, any questions there? Okay, let's jump into the instructional expenditure areas. So in the curriculum world that Mr. Neenan is in charge of, we have some staffing changes. K-5 director and a director of 612 ELA and strategic initiatives are coming on board in the curriculum world. Those are lateral FTE moves from special education, and you'll see that later. We are moving special education administration over to curriculum. So those will be flat, but as far as the curriculum budget, it's going to look like an increase. We're also shifting some additional secretarial support moving into curriculum as well because of that. All other lines are being held flat, and you'll see a reduction in supply purchases that we've done across the board when you look at the numbers. Okay, so you see for the 18-19 proposed budget an increase, because that's all salary increases plus 2 new administrative positions, that this is where we now have to record them and moving forward. Okay, and then you see the non-instructional salaries is where the secretarial support will be coming over that had previously resided in special education. Okay, supply line, you see a 15% reduction. We are looking, we do zero-based budgeting, so we're looking at those line items of what do we really need to run the program. So we could do a 15% reduction and still be able to perform the tasks necessary. Professional development and the contractual staying flat, as well as our BOCES services, feeling we are good with that number. That will include everything for next year. Any questions on curriculum? Okay. So early in our budget planning, revealed that we were probably looking at an estimated 10 additional placements for 18-19 in special education. Early on in our budget meetings with Shelley and the special education staff, my blood pressure went through the roof. So a couple late nights of trying to think of our okay, thanks. I just got the TRS update. Now I got, back-to-back meetings. Never schedule special education and getting the retirement system update at the same time. So it's obviously going to put a substantial amount of pressure on the overall budget.
Yeah.
So, we brainstormed a whole bunch of ideas. Okay, what can we do to kind of think through this a little bit more? And so we just started discussing the concept of returning programs back to Webster from BOCES. We have some significant cost expenditures with BOCES. The one program we were looking at, we spend over $2 million a year at this one program alone. Long-term, every year that I've been here, I've come to you during budget season, and our program costs around BOCES when it comes to special education, they're not slowing down. Their year-to-year increases are, in that 7 to 12% range, generally around 10. So one of the main questions is can we run this program more cost effectively in-house? And I used capital letters, yes, I think we could as we started to go down this path. And it's also an excellent exercise in our zero-based budget, needs-based, because we really started at the ground floor with an issue, a problem that we saw coming, and worked through it together as a team, thinking, all right, let's build it from the base on up. So what were some of the questions we kind of looked at that we thought needed to be answered? Do we have the space? Yes. Can we find the staff? Yes. We made Dave say yes, even though he probably doesn't agree with some of it. Is it best for students? Yes. Will we lose some aid was one of the questions, because these students, we get the excess cost aid. Yes, we will, but it's a 1-year delay, and the long-term budgetary savings will negate that impact. And so what are these exact staffing changes that we're going to do for this? So 4.0 FTE for new teachers for this program, 1.0 FTE for speech language, 2.0 FTE for OT, occupational therapy and physical therapy services, 4.0 for teaching assistants, 4.0 for aid support in special education. But then we're also reducing 2.0 in administration. Those were those 2 positions that are sliding over to curriculum. 3.0 reduction in administrative support. Those are 2 positions that I just talked about going over to curriculum. And if you remember back when we did the operational budget in the beginning of March, that 1 position that was in the business office that is leaving this department and coming over to the business department. And you'll see additional funding for the new classroom spaces, because the program is going into a unique spot. And so there is some startup costs when it comes to supplies, materials, equipment that we have planned for this program. Okay?
Are the 4 new FTE teacher positions elementary?
Dave, maybe you could answer that. It doesn't necessarily have to be an elementary certification,
They're
correct?
elementary classrooms.
They're
Elementary,
el-
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
With
Okay.
the certificate, depends on
Yeah.
where they are with the certification.
Okay.
So it's either.
But it's because we had more elementary,
Correct.
yeah.
Correct. And the program we targeted was a elementary program from BOCES. We do have secondary programs, but the most expensive one that we looked at and broke down is specifically an elementary program.
And how many students approximately, do you know?
That we had in the program originally that we sent to BOCES was roughly 22, with several more in the pipeline. But I think we're still working out the exact number, but it's probably going to be somewhere around the high teens when we're all said and done. To bring back, yes.
And the other important piece is it's about the grouping of kids. So when we look at that group of kids, we can create programs that's going to meet their needs in appropriate groups.
Okay, just wondering.
Yep. So here's the special education by line items. So you see the salaries. Why is it significantly higher? Well, in that 5.74% jumps out at you, but that's 4 new teachers going into there, plus the salaries for the entire special education staff increase for next year. That's 4 teaching assistants being added to that line item. That is 1 speech teacher being added to that line item. So we have 9 FTEs going in, 2 FTEs coming out, so we're netting 7 additional FTEs and at a 5.74%. So in essence, if you think about what is our year-to-year rollover for instructional staff at a 3.2% contractual, we're just adding about another 2.5% with 7 FTEs. Does that make sense to everyone?
And I see you would be adding some part-time nursing help.
Yep, and that's going to
Because
be
it's,
in a different area of the budget, and the nurses get separated out into a pupil services budget. They don't come through here. So in the non-instructional part, which is only a 1.5%, and this is where we've had some turnover that's come into play, we are actually adding a 2.0 in the OT PT here, 4 aides, but we're also moving out the 3. These were where the 3 administrative support staff were. So those that got shifted elsewhere. So you could see only a 1.5% increase 6 new staff members, 3 leaving, so a 3.0 FTE increase in this line item nets out to be a 1.5% increase. Okay? And then you see some of the, like, equipment. You know, we're starting from the ground up. We're going to need some new furniture for these classrooms. We're going to need some new supplies for these classrooms. These are all the line items that we used to start building and pricing those things out.
And is equipment aidable? Will we get?
None of this, this is just our internal costs.
Yeah.
No, it's not aidable. You will see on the tuition line, that is going up significantly. That is for our private placement students. As you've noticed on the revenue side, you've seen how we've added some more revenue to that budget. Well, it's because we're spending it. And this is the area we're spending at. These are students that would go to like Hillside or Helper and Day Treatment and programs like that. Those tuitions are going up, plus we have a few more kids in those placements.
Just a clarifying question there, if I may.
Sure.
So that money is aidable as long as the places they're going to are part of New York State?
Correct. They're certified and approved by New York State. You're correct. Yep. So we have a few.
Do we have any that are not there in approved placements?
I don't think so.
Thank you.
Mhm. So then the main line I want to discuss right here is the BOCES services. So in 17-18, we were at 6.3 million that we budgeted for. So when we sat down and looked at where this number was going, this was going to be about 7 million, if not more, when we're looking at a budget draft. So what this new program is, in essence, doing, it's reversing that increase and then creating a savings. So we are dropping that down to just under 5 million, which is about a 25% reduction in our BOCES costs. Okay, so that's, you know, it really stunted the increase to this possible budget, but that also gave us significant savings moving forward. So with all those FTEs we just discussed going into the special education budget is going down about $750,000 because of this new program. It's how much we could do it significantly cheaper in-house for us. Any questions on that? Okay. So I want to jump right into the pupil services before we get into other areas because there's some carryover. The program is not all special education. Some of that support will come from our social workers and psychologists in some of these areas. So I wanted to jump into that one right now because it's going to support the special ed program. So what is being added to this budget because of the new program? 3.0 mental health as a breakdown of psychologists and social workers. An additional half-time nurse. Schlegel Road is already at a 1.5. This is where the program is going, so we're going to make that a 2.0, so additional half-time to help support the program. Okay. One of the other major changes to this pupil services is not knowing what's going on with the federal government, and one of our grant programs, we have a significant amount in the mental health pupil services. So we have FTEs allocated there, concerned about the loss of funds and not really what's going on. So just to kind of cover ourselves, you'll see a larger jump because I've backed off the grant. If we do lose those funds, I've put those funds back into the general fund budget to cover any expected losses. Hopefully it doesn't happen, and maybe it doesn't, but I'm just budgeting conservatively to plan for that in case it does. Okay.
Are there other staffing needs that we'll need to think about for this program, adaptive PE or?
So the physical education teacher at Schlegel will be able to provide that.
Provide that, okay.
For the students.
Okay.
Okay. So here's our line item. Salaries you see going up a little bit more because there's 3.0 FTE increase there, plus the flat dollar amount that I'm expecting possibly to lose out of the grant. So that raises that significantly. The non-instructional salaries you see is going up less than 1%, and that's with an additional half-time nurse because we've had some breakage there from staff moving and leaving. So we've actually had some savings that have helped actually eliminate that 0.5 increase here when you compare line item to line item. Okay. And once again, a small supplies reduction, like everybody across the district is doing as part of this budget program. Any questions with that? Makes sense. Okay. So instructional budget, what's being proposed? What's changing? We have an additional 1.0 FTE for a school resource officer in this budget, one for Schrader, one for Thomas now, to complement Officer Hurley. That is included in this budget, the 1.0. We have some additional elementary teaching assistants, really to help support some math instruction. And to alleviate some substitute shortages, we think we could better utilize that, coming up with a procedure where these teaching assistants that are helping with math can also help with doing some subbing for us and having some permanent fixtures in the building. So almost killing two birds with one stone, improving our math at the elementary while helping to address substitute shortages.
Do we have permanent subs in our elementary buildings that come every day or are assigned to a building for a year? Or?
Yeah, we do, but that process hasn't been as effective, I think, Dave, is the best way to say, as we hope for. Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this was a concept we thought of. Hey, we were looking to improve and add some assistance with math support at the elementary.
Right.
So why don't we get creative and use those positions to build a kind of team foundation where they get comfortable working with that team of teachers and that group and could easily step in as necessary.
Would they need to be certified teachers?
No, they don't need to be.
Certified teachers, assistants.
So they'll have
Teaching
to,
assistants.
yes.
They're all certificates.
Yep.
You can still sub.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a certified teacher to sub. Okay,
Yep. Yep, you'll see reductions in supplies and textbooks as we move resources to over to digital and electronic sources. So a lot of that, you also see an increase in equipment as teachers are putting in more requests for some flexible furniture and flexible seating. A lot of principals are supporting that by reducing what they're spending on supplies and textbooks. So you'll see those changes too when we go over the line items. And I just want to point out the building budgets are included in this number. I'll show you, I separated them out, but overall on this number includes the building budgets. So instructional salaries is going up about 3.4%, but this is where all the TAs are also located in the instructional salary. So you'll see that kind of skews above where we normally would see our instructional salaries going up. Our non-instructional salaries you see are climbing. That's all of our regular aides that we have, and that group is impacted by minimum wage. So we'll see that increase at higher trend rates than most. And then this is probably the budget where you see the most moving parts and fluctuation, like equipment going up 9% because you're seeing supplies going down 15%. Because people are jockeying their building budgets around. Well, I'm going to spend $5,000 less on paper, and I wanted to move that to equipment, and vice versa. So you'll see our textbooks is going down as well because they're moving some of those funds. We're also increasing our digital work. You'll see that on the instructional technology budget. The contractuals right here, the largest increase, that is where the 1.0 resource officer goes into. Because that's a contract between us and the law enforcement agency. That person is not housed on our payroll per se. We write a accounts payable check to pay that agency for that percentage in that time. So that's why you see that significant jump on the contractual line.
We're hoping to have some grant money.
Right.
Yeah, and
Some kind of funding stream from the new Assembly or Senate bill, the Senate bill.
yeah, we'll see which one comes.
Offset some of that increase.
Yeah, see which one comes to fruition of the, about a dozen. I think it was at least over a dozen on that one that we got forwarded to us of the different nuances and things that the Senate is working on. So overall, still just a shade over 3% on our entire instructional budget.
That's good.
Okay. So just a note about our building budgets, we asked for a 15% reduction in supply lines this year. Saw a lot of movement with the textbook lines, as I just showed you, for those electronic resources and for equipment. A lot of the buildings are focusing on that equipment for classroom redesign. If you've been on many of the facilities tours, you've seen some of that already happening, to go with the smaller, flexible furniture instead of the bulkier, clunkier, old Corecraft furniture that we've had around a lot. So one of the things, though, if there's any additional aid given to the district over what we would normally expect, I would prioritize adding back some of the supply money to the buildings into the future.
Or adding to equipment? Or are we okay with the equipment?
I think we're good at the equipment lines. We'll give them a little bit more flexibility on the supply lines.
Because I know when we went on our building visit, a lot of the teachers were using those new desks.
Right.
Or stand-up desks, and,
Yeah,
you
But
know,
I do know elementary classrooms sort of march along on their supplies. It's-
yeah, that's true, they do.
Yeah.
So here's just a 4-year look of every single building. I know one of the main things I've tried to do since I've come on board is to even out every building, look at per pupil expenditures and making sure it's as fair and even as possible. So you could see they're all fairly much in line, especially on the secondary side. So here's just a 4-year look of what each building's budget is set up to be. Our instructional supervision, this is all of our principals and secretarial support. You'll notice supplies and contractuals have been reduced because these are our offices, generally their budgets through here, so every building's office. They have in essence dropped a lot of what they normally spend on and allocated those into their equipment lines as well to help drive some more furniture. A lot of the building principals have done that. Well, you see our instructional salaries are at 2% for 18-19 for all of our building administrators, just about $70,000 increase. We have some breakage there that has helped reduce that overall expenditure. The non-instructional salaries are the secretaries, and then you see the reductions in supplies and contractuals for their budgets.
Do you think we're using less paper district-wide since more?
I think we're getting there.
Are we?
I think
'Cause
we're
more and
seeing-
more things come
yeah.
electronically and,
More things are going electronically.
good.
Okay. Our library budget, no staffing changes. A reduction in supply lines because we really, we wanted to do a blanket 15 to get into a comfort zone of, we're trying to hit that window of what we thought we were going to get in additional foundation aid. And so they've gotten an increase in their electronic databases as kind of like an offset. They're doing more in that digital world and opening up those software things. So there's more money there for them, but a reduction of the traditional library supplies. Still significantly over what we get for library aid. The district is still spending about $110,000 more than what we get in library materials aid. So not a really burdensome reduction, but like I said, if we get some funding back, we'll look to
And
reestablish this too.
Would library supplies include the books that they order for? Or?
Yep, that's in library materials
Materials.
as well.
Okay.
They're fairly interchangeable. Do you want to buy books out of either one? It's fine. It doesn't. It's just one of those old New York State coding things. You had library materials and library supplies, but when we go to report it, they get condensed into one. So.
Question on the salary?
Sure.
4.1 change, that includes salary and benefits?
Nope, it's just salaries.
So if they had an increase in contractual of 3%,
3.2.
okay.
But it could have, what could be the changes the year before. It dropped significantly because of a couple retirements.
Okay.
So it's making it look like the new increase is significantly higher.
Okay.
So the TAs in there too.
Thank you, I was just, yes.
Yeah.
There's also teaching assistants that
Okay.
support the libraries that are in here.
But they didn't go up, you said there wasn't a change in numbers.
There isn't. These are already established teaching assistants
Okay.
that are assigned to the library. So it's not just the librarians themselves, it's the library teaching assistants
Okay.
who could have possibly be influenced by minimum wage as well.
Okay.
Okay, instructional technology. We're entering our third year of the lease cycle. No staffing changes. Our student work program, we're maintaining that. Like I said, that's going to have a minimum wage impact. Our BOCES increases with this budget are significant because we're trying to funnel as much to BOCES for the aid as possible. So a lot of our project lead the way supplies and equipment for the classes, they're significant costs, but we're running them through instructional technology to get aid. This year, we're also adding classroom calculators. Calculator sets have been included, and some additional software costs and digital resources. So those costs have increased as well. Another cost increase is the fiber network. That's the result of the smart bond. They've kind of gone hand in hand. Our fiber is almost tripled our costs in that department since we've installed all the wireless data points for what we're streaming and what we're using. So I believe at the last workshop I discussed how we were having some savings on the phone lines. So all those phone line savings are now going over to the digital world as we've transitioned. So you'll see those cost increases. And generally our BOCES programs, this is our year-to-year, one of our greatest costs, year-to-year increase on those software costs that we buy year-to-year. I mean, those costs are trending not at the 2%. They're trending, this software, okay, it's 6% increase next year. And so we're seeing those costs go up more and more. Also, I just wanted to point out with BOCES, all the districts buy into BOCES services, but there are certain services you need to purchase to get access to other services. And that is no more the case than in instructional technology. I'll use an example. We pay $115,000 a year for instructional technology repair. That just gives us the right to buy instructional technology, but we don't really use them for instructional repair. We just have to pay for it because that's the way the state is setting it up. And it's, to no fault of anybody's, but those increases are all based on our WADA data, so they fluctuate a little bit more. So we're seeing some higher costs for those required mandated, what we call COSER line items from BOCES. Okay?
Brian?
And
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so why don't we use those services?
because we actually do them in-house with kids.
Oh, it's the kids.
Yep.
That's the direct,
Yeah.
okay. And that's more beneficial.
And I'll
Gotcha.
piggyback off that. I think the board was impressed when we saw the student work program, if
Oh,
it's the
yeah.
one we're talking
Oh,
about.
yeah.
And I'm glad it's being maintained. Is there any possibility we can increase it? I'm looking over at Brian on that one. Or we just don't have the space and the time and it doesn't fit into the schedule?
That's what I'm wondering.
Because I'll tell you,
You don't turn kids away.
We don't, yeah, are you talking more specifically to the class that they offer now, or the actual just the WTI
Yeah, the
kids
WTI
helping out? Yeah,
when we saw those kids at work, they were
It was wonderful.
unbelievably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever-
What incredible
Whoever
experience.
wants to
Yeah.
do it, they can do it.
yep.
Does this, Brian, does this include all our STEM instructional
That's why.
for, in this budget here?
It depend, so, it does, like the Project Lead the Way stuff, all gets run through this BOCES line. So as we have a new Project Lead the Way course, so you see, the BOCES line is a significant increase, but everything we're buying for that course, all the, computer supplies, the specific software, the specific materials they need in that class, we are putting it through BOCES to get aid. Rather than a traditional instructional line. So that's why, that some of those courses are $100,000 increase. Yeah.
I bet it does. Is there anything else we can run through there? As
We-
far as like,
Round runs.
like-
Is there anything they can run through BOCES?
They know what's the first thing when they come ask for, or come look for something. Could be,
We're trained, I mean, we're fully trained how to do that, 100%.
yep,
Run our PD through BOCES now.
yeah, we have,
Even the PD we do here in district, somehow he does it through BOCES. It's really cool.
because I'm sitting here thinking, we had a talk just before this started about robotics.
Right.
You know, how important it is, and I'm gonna tell you how proud we should be of it in Webster. What can we do with that? Because again, it's a limited budget and they can do so much more. Is that something that could be run through BOCES?
that is, the robotics is unique because it's a club and they're part of an outside organization to a certain extent, the Rochester Community Robotics Club.
501c,
Yeah, so it's
a little different.
It's a little different. You know, they have like their own little boosters program. They have their own sponsorships. And, you know, do we support the club? Yeah, you know, we do some stuff. We've, you know, put some room redesign into Thomas to help him out and some storage things. But, you know, are there some other things we could do? I'm sure Brian could explore that. And, you know, as far as a statewide curriculum for things like that, you know, I'm sure we'd hop on if it was developed and brought to us.
Okay. Thanks.
Trying to do more at the younger level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're trying to do more to keep the program, we're trying to do more right now with the younger level.
Yeah.
We've worked with Brian actually to help us get us to each of the different 7 elementaries. So
Is it the
there's
Lego
more
robotics you're trying to do more with?
Yep.
We're trying to do more and more with that, yeah. And that's actually something we've talked to with the coaches.
Yeah.
Is one of the things that they had come actually to Carmen and I and suggested that we put some resources, if we can,
Right.
towards that. So we put a little, but not a ton. We can revisit how much.
In the last 5 years, I think the biggest aspect to that is the coaches, is the mentors that you have.
Oh, absolutely.
No doubt about it.
Those are all volunteer.
And it's volunteer. And there's good ones, and there's not so good ones. And you can see the program and what turns out.
Yeah, we get some really excellent community members that are a part of that program, that have pride in that program.
Oh, absolutely.
It's fantastic.
So here's our line items. You see the non-instructional salaries going up a little bit more than contractual rates. Like I said, it's the kids, the college kids with the minimum wage increase. You know, we also, to a certain extent, will pay the returning kids more than minimum wage because we want them coming back.
Sure.
So we'll throw an extra 25 cents an hour for them coming back above what somebody's just hiring rather than, to keep them interested in the program and coming back. But everything else is kind of held flat with our equipment and software. Those are our state lines, some contractuals that we spend out that we, for the few things we can't send to BOCES, and our supplies and conference line to help support instructional tech. Next is athletics. No additional staffing here. Like I said, we did the reduction in supply lines in line with all other departments. But you'll see increase in BOCES services. Over the past couple of years, when you think, what is BOCES doing with athletics? It really doesn't make sense. But it's opened up that we could now do a lot of the stuff we were spending out of our own budget into a BOCES budget. So we have an online registration software platform that we are now using because BOCES made that available. Video management software, concussion management, all purchased through BOCES. These are things we are buying through our contractual lines. So what does that do? Does that help for athletics? Because they do have, it's a very small part of the budget for the amount of teams we run. So it frees up some funding under their contractuals that they can do some other things with by adding those BOCES costs. So they'll have some other things there. One of the things that we have done is no longer charging for PE for bowling and skating. We used to send those permission slips home. We are now doing that as part of the curriculum, and the district is taking those costs on.
Do all of our athletes get concussion protocols, or is it just like football, lacrosse, soccer, hockey?
It's everybody.
Everybody now? Okay.
I'm almost 100% sure it's everybody. I can double check.
So that's a lot of athletes that are being tested.
Yep. It's not every year. I believe they still do them at benchmark years.
No.
Go.
So you're saying the equipment goes through BOCES that you buy?
So a lot of this digital software equipment
Yeah.
and some of the sport equipment that we do at the stadiums, like the video out for all the teams, we've run that through BOCES now. We've now run through BOCES our Section 5, our costs for being part of Section 5 are now can go through BOCES. So, yeah, it's opened up a few more possibilities.
So our total budget for athletics is right here?
Right here, a little less than $2 million. So you see the BOCES service increase because we're able to move some of these contractuals, keep contractuals flat, give them a little bit more money to, to pay for those PE programs without really increasing the budget on those line items, but adding those costs over to a BOCES line, which then becomes aidable. You see, we also have the 15% reduction for supplies for athletics like everybody else as well. Yeah.
So the instructional salaries are the PEs?
It's not PE, it's all the coaching salaries.
All coaching salaries?
All coaching salaries.
Okay. And the contractuals you said was what?
It could be when we send out helmets for repairs,
Okay.
refurbishments, things
Yep.
like that.
Could be fees too that you have to.
Could be fees,
Yeah.
yep.
Along to Section 5.
Section 5, Monroe County. Rentals is huge. Renting space, for like the ice arena for our hockey teams, renting the lanes for the bowling teams. So that all gets wrapped up into the contractual as well. Okay. Co-curricular is pretty flat. These are just our extracurricular. We did a small reduction to supply lines here as well. Small increase and the salaries just to get that new Lego program at the elementary level off the ground a little bit more. Other than that, it's pretty status quo for this budget area in co-curricular activities.
So is that each elementary school that has the new Lego club?
That's what we're shooting for. Each one
Okay.
will have
Their own?
So total revenues is at 171,910,955. So the expenditures tonight and last presentation total us to 172,316,603. It's a 2.59% budget to budget increase over 17-18, which is just about 4.3 million, just a little over $4.3 million. So when you subtract those two numbers, we have a budget gap of $405,648. This gap is right at the amount of total foundation aid that was added to the district by the legislature last year. So we're able to work this budget right into that kind of zone where it'd be like comfortable preparing with assuming we're going to get more foundation aid. And so I think we'll be able to close this within the next 2 weeks fairly easily based on everything that we're hearing out of Albany, and still maintain all our changes and the additions that we've added to the district. And also one of the most important is no additional use of any kind of reserves to close this
Yes.
budget gap.
Good.
You know, at our last meeting, we heard our students speak, and I
Yes.
wish they were here because we are kind of addressing their need. We're adding an SOR.
Yes.
So,
SRO.
but we
Yes.
heard what they had to say.
Yes.
And we considered their input
Important,
seriously.
timely.
Our kids need to feel safe at school.
Absolutely.
They're students.
I think it's beyond safe. I think Dave Hurley does such a great job in so many other areas, not just making them feel safe.
So what if the possibility we actually receive more than the $405,000 based on what the Assembly proposal would do and the Senate proposal I think is a right step forward. So what are our priorities? Well, we'd like to replenish those supply lines that we've reduced right now. There's some additional software and digital platform requests that are hanging out there. that we might like to address, and some professional development, maybe allocate some more funds to summer trainings for support staff, especially with, I know we've talked about a new math expressions program coming out, and these TAs, teaching assistants, support math instruction, maybe doing a little bit more focused PD over the summer as well, allocating some funds there. So those are just a few things that were kind of coming to the forefront. If we do, by any chance, get the benefit of having more foundation aid above and beyond what our $405,000 gap is. Questions, comments?
Thank you. This is excellent work, and we appreciate all the effort that's gone into this, especially all the BOCES aidable line items we learned about. Do we want to go around and see if anyone has comments? Jan, do you want to start? Do you have any questions or comments?
I think I asked mine all the way through.
Okay.
Thanks.
I did too.
I only have one thought.
Sure.
All the equipment that, let's say, might be changed out and new equipment phased in, is there any market for it? And do we still store unused equipment off-site in a trailer anywhere else?
We're trying to do some house cleaning. Because a lot of it, to be honest with you, it's not great. So if it's metal, we'll scrap it. There isn't a really good secondary market for the old, stuff that's made down the road in Auburn.
Desks and,
Yeah.
I was just curious. Thank you. Mike?
All set.
I'm okay. Great job.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Do you have anything you want to add? Are
it's
you,
all good.
okay, so we entertain a motion to adjourn,
I'll make that motion.
Second.
and all in favor? Okay, thank you, everybody.